Hello, welcome to my screencast discussing what was covered in this module's reading and in the clips that we watched. Um, and these are just some of the main key points for me. These aren't necessarily new concepts to me. These are concepts that I am aware of, that I've talked at length about with peers and with coworkers, and that have been covered in previous classes. But still, although they're not necessarily new concepts, I think they're important concepts to discuss here, and then also to always keep in mind as an educator in a position to potentially make a difference. Um, I want to talk first about what Kozel discusses at length in his clip, this concept of the savage inequalities that exist, and the disparities that exist between affluent schools in suburban areas and inner city schools, um, and the lack of resources that exist there that is absolutely perpetuating cycles of poverty, and essentially setting students up for failure. And I think that's really interesting how that kind of aligns very nicely with what Sumner discusses at length in her TED Talk. And although her TED Talk was fantastic and it covered really so much, it was very thorough and very insightful. What I chose to take away from that is this concept of resegregation in schools. And Sumner claims that we might be experiencing a segregation in schools today that is even worse than the segregation that existed before they were desegregated. And if you really think about that, like what had to happen for us to get there? And I think a lot of that has to do with the standardized test system. And it's unfortunate how standardized tests have influenced um, schools to obtain or achieve reputations where some families would feel their students or their children deserve better. And they have the capabilities of removing their students from those environments, and in doing so, taking resources with them. Um, and again, kind of doing two things, sort of fanning that flame of the savage inequalities that are existing, but also, again, resegregating the schools, because what you're left with are inner city schools that are primarily uh, of minority demographics, and lacking resources, lacking the resources that they need. Um, and I want to talk about something that really jumped out at me in the text, this concept around stereotype threat. And this actually is a new concept for me. This is not something that I've read or heard about before, but it does totally make sense to me. And I think it is something that I want to always bear in mind and keep in mind in my own classroom. This concept that stereotypes have the potential to affect psychologically our students and the way that they perform. And I also put down this growth mindset, which wasn't necessarily covered in any of the concepts or in the text, but I think it's important to keep all of this in mind. And then how essentially our responsibility is to instill a growth mindset in our students, but how difficult that job is when we are up against such disparities, right? And this concept of stereotype threat. So, anyways, these are some of the main key takeaways for me. Um, I appreciate the effort that was put into designing this module. I felt it was really insightful and important. So, thank you for that. Until next time.